You are listening to a Raptors podcast, the place every week for all things Raptors. Get ready and never underestimate the heart of a champion. All right, and welcome back to a Raptors podcast. This one is going to be a bit shorter than usual, only 2 games to talk to you about here. One of them against Pascal Siakam's Pacers on Valentine's Day, and then one against the Victor Wembanyama-led Spurs team. Both losses, one of them a much better game than the other. But before I get into any of that, I would firstly like to talk about the skills competition that I just saw Scottie Barnes and Trae Young, and of course Scottie Barnes' best friend, best hugger, Tyrese Maxey. It was pretty interesting to see just how, and it's something that I've thought about for a while, just how Scottie Barnes is received around the NBA as a whole and the media. Because, every single time I look on Instagram comments, which seem to be the worst perpetrators of this, but they're always talking about how Scottie Barnes is some sort of, has some mental issues. And I just would like to say, it's just so disgusting to see people not only make bad comments towards somebody in general, just at any point, and also just the insinuation that is even a bad thing, or that would have any effect on basketball as a whole. It's just making fun of somebody for having some, basically calling him autistic and then making fun of him for that is quite frankly disgusting. And I would just like to get in front of that and say, it's really disappointing to see some people go to that length. It's not really what you want to see, and I do hope people realize that's not how everybody thinks. But anyway, Scottie hitting all his shots there in that third and final skills challenge there. Didn't hit any of the half-court shots, but once he got time to practice that, he's a basketball player. But yeah, let's talk about some of that basketball. And the most recent game against Pascal Siakam was one of the more fun ones we've had this season. It was a 2-point game. Scottie Barnes really showed up. RJ Barrett showed up. And, of course, the reason why this is such a notable game is because Pascal Siakam showed up back in town after the trade. Lots of smiles. One of the best standing ovations, I think, we've given a Raptors player, and he deserves it, obviously. And he was talking about after the game how important it was to him to see the entire arena packed with Scottie Barnes jersey, Jesus, with Pascal Siakam jerseys, and it was, just to see him happy made me happy. And it's so rare that you have a connection with a player like that, where you just hope the best for them, and it doesn't stretch beyond team boundaries. I don't really believe in the whole player fandom that seems to be catching on, but it does, you still root for him heavily, and I know Masai rooted for him, and I know so many people, you can see it today, or not today, but Valentine's Day, you could see how many people were still rooting for him, and he deserves everything. He's really just exactly what you want from a star as a, leader of our city, and for him to champion that and still champion it for the future as his home, as his place, where he resides, it's really special. And he had a good game in this one, led the Pacers in scoring. It was, like I said, just not only that a great game to watch from that perspective, but also just a great game to watch in general, because the Raptors looked like they were going to take this one just about from the beginning. They start out the opening quarter with 35 points to Indianapolis's 31, and a high-flying offense as the Pacers are, the record-breaking quickest offense in the league history. The Raptors kept up with them, and it was mostly due and behind to a great Scottie Barnes performance. And you're going to look in the box score and you're going to see 6 turnovers. And sure, that's a pretty steep amount of turnovers. And, he doesn't hit any threes. But Scottie Barnes went toe-to-toe with Siakam today. And, he's been doing it all season. But to see him even take it a step further than I think Siakam did in this one. Obviously, Siakam down the stretch was the best player. But to see Scottie Barnes throughout the course of a game keep his energy up, because he's sort of really, especially that was sort of the dialogue coming into the season, is he's able to turn it on in these fourth quarters, but in those first couple ones before then, how was he able to keep his offense going? And he's supplemented with 3-point shooting. You don't see it here, but he gets to the free throw line. He's a stronger player than we've seen him in the past, being able to just bully guys. He has 12 rebounds in this one, 8 assists, and he's running the offense. You have Quickly there, but Quickly has 7 assists, Scottie Barnes 8. Scottie Barnes is running the offense more than Siakam ever did, and he's the next step in that sort of point forward role that we get to see in Toronto. And you can see it, him playing with Maxey and Young in Indianapolis. Oof, that one took a couple. In Indianapolis for the All-Star Skills Challenge. I'm not even sure if obviously the game was played in Toronto, but maybe they hopped on the same plane as Siakam and Tyrese on the way back. Just get there a bit earlier. And you can see him making the same passes, right? Getting the same types of scores, hitting the threes, and he does it at a much bigger size, like I was talking about earlier, that he's able to bully guys, and it reminisces of how LeBron sort of played. And I'm not going to compare him to LeBron, and they're different people, and I think it would be, maybe a bit too early to make that comparison, but you can see some of the skills on display from Scottie Barnes that you saw LeBron display. And I think it's really great for him to have a coach like Darko, and he continues to blossom in this system. And he's blossoming around guys like RJ, Emmanuel Quickly. Podol had a great game in this one. Not often a big Podol fan, but he did have a great game in this one, and he has sort of been picking it up since those trade deadline moves were made. And we'll have to see how he continues to perform. But he is getting a little bit of mojo back, having a true point guard like Quickly back on the roster. And, he had that game with Fred, and he's developing it with Quickly. Gary Trent, once again, disappointing. Starting, it's not really what you like to get. Bruce Brown probably would have given you better minutes if he started. I know they're trying to get Gary Trent back situated, but it's not really being impressive. And when I talk about the Spurs game, he only had 4 points in that one. Still really disappointing from his perspective. And, I think this is the quintessential tank loss. You showed some great performances. Bruce Brown was good. Boucher was good. Olynyk not so much. Grady Dick gave you some good minutes. And, of course, RJ, Scottie Barnes I was talking about earlier, Podol. And you can see the building blocks. And you get that better draft positioning because the Pacers were just that little bit better because of Pascal Siakam. And Halliburton, 12 assists, he's racking those up. But Siakam was the go-to scorer in this game for the Pacers down the stretch. Why wouldn't he be? That's exactly where you're at. If it's not now, when is it? And he did show it today, and I think he is, a really good fit with this Pacers team with the speed they like to play with in transition. He's still getting his feet under him, scoring a bit, slightly less than he did in a Raptors jersey, but I'm sure he'll figure it out. He's sort of got to peck a bit lower on the totem pole if that makes any sense, because Halliburton's there and you got more mouths to feed, but it does fit so well. I think it'll work out either way. And Siakam is, and I think it's part of the reason why Masai made that deal in the first place. And I do apologize if I'm being a little quiet. It is a little late, and I got to be up tomorrow anyway. It's a whole ordeal. But I do apologize. It's sort of how it has to be, though, as I transition to our final and second game of the day that I'm going to be talking about, the week, I guess you should say, against the San Antonio Spurs. The 11-43 San Antonio Spurs as of this game against the 19-35 Raptors. And just talking about these records, we're getting pretty deep in the season here. And as much as I haven't, I've enjoyed the season for sure, but as much as I've been disappointed, I guess, with this season, I will miss it when it's gone. And it's, there's not really, especially in that sort of summer months, there's no football, no basketball, nothing really to fill that hole. So I am going to miss the Raptors when it's over. It's just something to think about, as we get pretty deep into the season here, All-Star break point. It's the beginning of the end, but it's also the beginning of the beginning, as in the beginning of the playoffs is the beginning of everything, especially these days. That's all people seem to care about, really. Raptors will not be joining anybody in the playoffs, but, we can have fun games like this against the Spurs where the Raptors lose by 23 to one of the only teams in the NBA that's worse than them. And it was one of Scotty Barnes' worst performances. I was just talking about last week how he, was struggling, and there was some talk about him regressing after that Pistons game. And obviously, the game against the Pacers sort of counteracted that narrative. But this one, 3 for 15, really disappointing game. 9 assists, 9 rebounds, steal block. Sure, you're going to get that with Scotty. But 7 points, just not enough. They didn't even get to the free throw line at all. They did a really good job against him. Kelly Olynyk was pretty much the only big gold star for the Raptors, even though he was a minus 20. That shows you really how down bad the Raptors were in this one. Grady Dick as well, minus 12, 18 points, 4 for 5 from 3, 7 for 10 from the field. Not really giving us anything else in the stat sheet, and that's why you see that negative 12 by his name. Bruce Brown, I guess, gave us some good minutes, but we were really trying just about everything out there today against the Spurs. McDaniels got minutes, Mohamedou Gaye got minutes, Nwora, Porter, of course Akbaji, 1 for 8. Disappointing performance again. He and Nwora pretty much interchangeable, as they got the same amount of minutes against the Pacers as well. Gary Trent, like I was talking about earlier, 4 points total. I guess looking at everybody else's stat line, a pretty good performance for him. 12 points, 6 boards, not as many. You need more from Jakob. But he only played 20 minutes. So you take what you can get, I guess. 12 points, 5 for 10. Barrett, I guess, was decent as well, though he was minus 30. It was really disappointing, and the Spurs just, sort of dominated from the beginning. They took a big lead in the second and third quarters, winning both those by 11 points, and, you can't really come back from that. Toronto won the fourth, but it was a lot late. Devin Vassell, who I always have been, complimentary of his game and his style. I think he does have a future in the NBA. Not every player, especially on the bad teams, especially drafted in those teens, has a shot. But I think Vassell has a little something to his game. Had 5 threes in this one. Obviously, Wemby, dominant, 10 blocks. 5 assists, 4x5, 5x5 if you're counting turnovers, 10 blocks, 2 steals, he's an incredible player, and watching today, he sprinkled in a couple threes, free throw line 5 for 6, better than most Raptors can do if you gave him 6 attempts. And he is the future of the NBA, barring injury, which is something you're always gonna say. He is impressive to see, and it's gonna be interesting to see what they do coach-wise, because I think you do need, with every good player, you'll need somebody to coach them up for it, and Wemby has that in Pop, but where does the future of this Spurs team lay, coaching-wise, is really a question I'm going to be asking for them for the future. But he just does everything you want, and he's the prototypical future center, like Chet is, like Scotty sort of is, and he can do just a little bit of everything. And he does a little bit of everything well. Vassell, like I said, had a good game. Jeremy Sochan, they have some nice pieces here surrounding the Spurs, and they've sort of been in this limbo for a while now, and getting Wemby really set their timeline. It's like, okay, now we can start to improve. But they're going to get another good pick this year, and obviously it's not as strong of a draft, but they can you see the pieces for sure. But in the end, it is a really disappointing game against the Spurs, and those are going to happen, but I think I've said that just about too many times this year already for that to really take hold. And this is not a good Raptors team. If you were here to watch a good team, I don't know what to tell you, but that's not what you're going to get. And we're 50-odd games through the season, and it's not going to, the writing's on the wall with this team for sure. But for so many other teams, it isn't. And I think this season and playoffs has some really good stuff in store for us here in the future after this All-Star break. So with that in mind, I'm going to now transition right into our league surroundings, check the standings. It's a shorter episode, and I'll have you guys on your way, and I'll see you next week as well. But before I even do that, I will also look up at the upcoming Raptors schedule, so I'll be back in a second. So for the upcoming week, I've still got 2 more games for you here. Brooklyn, Atlanta back-to-back. First one in Toronto against Brooklyn. Then we're on the road in Atlanta. 2 games with middling opponents that we can win. Do we want to win? Probably not. So it'll be interesting to see, Scotty Barnes coming back to see his teammate Trae Young. And it'll be a tough game, as always, to watch Trae Young play basketball. I'm not the biggest fan. And Brooklyn, who knows what they're doing, really. You would have expected both these teams to have made some trade deadline moves, but they didn't. So it'll be interesting to see who keeps their job. But it'll be, back-to-back games, both winnable, both losable. I'm sort of turning at this point, hoping maybe they will lose. But I'm hoping for fun and never going to be upset about a loss, about a win. Jesus, maybe I am going loony. But I think at this point I'm not going to be upset at a loss either. And I'm happy either way. And that's the way you got to slice it. Anyway, let's transition to the NBA standings and landscape, and I'll have you guys on your way. All right, and I am back here to talk about the NBA landscape. Boston Celtics still atop the East, really separating themselves. Great season they've had so far, and they're really looking like a juggernaut to really be contended with. Coming up in second, out of the blue, is the Cleveland Cavaliers, being on a tear of recent, continuing their tear. Knicks lost 4 in a row. They were sort of on a tear with them. So Cleveland Cavaliers are dominating right now, and they find themselves in second place in the Eastern Conference out of nowhere. Third, we have the Milwaukee Bucks, although they have been disappointing to say the least with their new coach, Doc Rivers. Somehow they find themselves third in the East. And I wasn't really the biggest supporter of the firing of Adrian Griffin, but it's even looking worse now, seeing what Doc Rivers has had in store for them. And I think that's going to be one of the moves that people look back on it with confusion. You don't usually hire a coach mid-season, especially after you just hired one the season before. So, really interesting move, seeming to be backfiring for them. Another new head coach who's been struggling as of recent is Nick Nurse with the 76ers in Philadelphia. They're 3-7 in their last 10, just like the Bucks, and find themselves fifth in the East, but only 2 games ahead of the Indiana Pacers, 2.5 games ahead of the 8th-seeded Orlando Magic. It's, without Joel Embiid, they seem to be, drowning. I skipped over the Knicks, but we're talking about them a little bit earlier. Lost 4 in a row. They'll figure it out for sure. This break is probably needed for them, the Bucks and the 76ers. And then you have the Pacers, the Heat, and the Magic, who seem to be, all good teams. All will probably make the playoffs. But it'll be interesting to see how far they really do. But they are, clipping on the heels of some of these teams that have been really impressive, like the Knicks and the Bucks and the 76ers. And maybe they're looking, for the first time this season, a bit further up the standings and thinking, maybe we can contend here. And that's all in due time. Below them is the Bulls, the Hawks, the Nets. Nets and Hawks. Raptors are going to be playing. Raptors 3.5 games behind the Nets. I don't really know what to say about these teams other than, they should have made some trades because their players' values are dwindling after disappointing seasons for them. Raptors have at least bottomed out and picked a direction, but Bulls, Hawks, Nets haven't really done so. Nets get a little bit more of a break, but yeah, disappointing stuff. Hornets, Wizards, Pistons, don't need to talk about them. I will say, though, Hornets won 3 in a row as of recently. So, hey, they're on track to pass the Raptors. Here, talking about the Western Conference now, we have atop the Western Conference the Minnesota Timberwolves, the OKC Thunder right behind them, and behind them are the Clippers and Nuggets. Those 4 are really the top. Nuggets lost 3 in a row. Break is probably needed for them as well. I mean, after going on a long finals run, usually teams start to sputter. It's really hard to play that much basketball so often, and I think that was sort of their plan the whole year, was to just take their time. No need to get into a big, conference lead. No need to, save your energy, right? Save it for the important parts at the end. But, they do need to pick it up quite a little bit. The Suns, Pelicans, Mavericks, even Kings are on their heels. And then you have the disappointing Lakers, the disappointing Warriors, finding themselves rounding out that play-in tournament. Clippers have been sort of slowing down, not as not as hot as they used to be. Timberwolves sort of picking up that mantle, but it's anybody's race here in the Western Conference, and that's what makes it so entertaining, and what will be so entertaining. Even these play-in tournament games, Warriors, Lakers, Kings, Mavericks, all great teams, all looking for 2 playoff spots. It's going to be a blast. Teams that have fallen out due to the Lakers and Warriors finding their groove here a little bit are the Jazz and the Rockets, sort of as you would expect. I think everybody would have picked these 10 teams, maybe not in this order, but these 10 teams to be in the play-in tournament or better in the Western Conference. And the final 3, Grizzlies, Blazers, Spurs, don't really need to talk about them. Grizzlies won 2 in a row, passing the Raptors. Raptors getting a little bit higher in the draft rankings. Anyway, that is going to do it for me today. This has been a Raptors podcast. As always, thank you so much. Follow me on Twitter. Do what you want. I'm not forcing you to do anything. Thank you for listening. This sort of ASMR style. I apologize for that once again. But I will be back to you guys at regular volume next week. So thank you for listening, as always, and I will see you guys back here again.